It's March 2nd, 2020, and you're listening to the third episode of the Roleplay Geeks podcast. And today we're going to talk about our first and our favorite role-playing experiences. Today we're going to talk a little bit about our first gaming experience, our favorite gaming experience or system, and future stuff that we might want to do. You want me to kick off? Shall I kick off? I'm going to kick off.
You kick off.
Oh, I'm going to kick off. All right. So, I know I'm going to steal thunder from Steve because I'm pretty sure I know his first. I could be wrong, but my first gaming system was D&D, and I'm pretty positive that's probably true of most of us. That certainly an early one, at the very least second. D&D was my very first one, and it was not Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's Dungeons and Dragons. I played the red box. Maybe the blue box. I can't remember. I think it was the red box I played. I played with our friend John, and he got introduced to it for our friend Steve. Well, his cousin Steve, our friend Steve. Different Steve Hill. But he introduced him to that, and then I think John got it for his birthday or something like that when we were 11, maybe. And the first time I played was right around that. I was about 11, and I made a dwarf. He was a warrior, and he had a crossbow, a sword, and a shield, and chainmail. And I don't know why I remembered that detail immensely, but it was Keep on the Borderlands was the very first adventure I think I ever played, ever. Steve?
So my first Dungeons & Dragons character was, and you may not remember, also a dwarf warrior.
So this is what I remember. This is why I think I remember Steve's first time, because I believe it was also the red box. And we made him become a dwarf because we were dwarves. And it was, I think, even at that time, Steve balked at that. He's never wanted to do what I wanted to do. So we made him do that because we really didn't understand at that time that the character is what you make of it. And, picking a dwarf or elf or human or fighter or whatever it is relatively unimportant. Everyone has a role. We didn't understand that. So.
Right. And luckily, very soon after that, within a year, we essentially settled into the kinds of characters that we've played almost ever since, in a lot of ways, in a D&D campaign.
Yeah, I haven't varied a lot. I should, but I haven't. So it was D&D.
D&D.
Yeah, and it was with me. That's how come I kind of know.
Yes.
That was his first system and first game. And I remember it was in John's bedroom with that card table.
Mm-hmm.
James, you came along later in our sort of sphere, so I know your experience was different than ours.
A little bit different. First game I ever played was one we made up ourselves. So I played with my cousin, who was my best friend at the time, and still a very close friend. I mean, he was my best friend growing up.
His name is Billy. We played with him a lot too, so yeah.
Yeah. And we started out with just graph paper, and one of us we didn't know about Dungeons & Dragons at the time. We were in elementary school, around 5th grade for me. Billy was 6th grade, going into 7th. And we would just have graph paper, and we would sit around and create dungeons. And we would have simple characters like fighters or magic users with maybe one spell. We were just making this up on the fly. And it was shortly after we started, maybe about 2 weeks, Billy's older brother told us about Dungeons & Dragons, and Billy saved up enough money, went out and bought the red box set. And that's probably the first game system that I ever played. And I think I played an elf, was my first character, an elf ranger, something like that.
That's kind of interesting, because basically I end up playing some form of elf ranger now. I don't know. Well, no, that's not true you have, but that's not typical for you. It's not totally. I mean, you're over the map, really. Yeah,
I mostly gravitate to magic using creatures, I think. What would you say?
All in all things being equal, probably true. But so that was, I think, our first systems. Can you remember what your second one was? This is like, what was the second video on MTV? It's a little harder.
Oh, for me, it's really easy. I know immediately. It was Star Frontiers. And I played the, what was the amoeba-shaped creature called? Do you remember, Steve?
Nobody remembers what it is. Everyone called it a shmoo.
Yeah.
Like everybody called it a shmoo.
Daggone it. No, I don't remember, but that was...
We're looking it up.
And you're going to say it, and I'm going to be mad that I didn't remember.
Rusk was the insect.
You didn't have to tell me that.
Oh, you knew
That's
that
my
one?
man.
Yeah, he was of Rusk early on.
Yeah.
What was your second system then?
Drawasite?
Well, it had to have been Gamma World or Star Frontiers.
It
with
was
us.
Gamma World.
Yeah.
It was definitely Gamma World was the second system. So John was into a series of books, the Bolo series or so.
Right.
Keith Laumer, I think is who wrote those. And for some reason, Steve Hill had done a Gamma World campaign around that. And we got really, really, really into that. And actually, I have the first edition Gamma World. I bought it on eBay 15 years ago or something like that. I have it in the other room over there. But that was definitely our second system.
I gave mine away to somebody, and I may have given away my box set of Star Frontiers, and that makes me a little sad.
So on let's go back to the first. So I think we all loved D&D. That's fair, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think it's fair to say we all still kind of like D&D when it's good. It's like a grilled cheese. You know, it's just a good, old, reliable thing.
Well,
I don't like grilled cheese.
why don't you like grilled cheese?
I just don't care much for grilled cheese.
I'll pick another metaphor that you like salmon,
You mean salmon?
whatever you want to say, like that, or a good tuna fish sandwich. There you go.
I can get behind a tuna fish sandwich.
Okay, so D&D is like your tuna fish sandwich, grilled cheese for Steven.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But okay, so it's a great system. But I actually can remember fairly strongly all the gaming systems I played in the order that I played them, up to a point. Can you? In the order that I played them?
No, I can't remember what happened this morning.
Yeah, well, I figured. So I can play. So I think Steve's right. We started with D&D, Redbox. Arguably, if you want to make the argument that Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is the second game, that was the second one. But and then Gamma World. And then Star Frontiers, and then Rolemaster was the next one. And then Star Master, and then John read, he's going to be on the podcast eventually. You hear his name a lot, but read a Mech Warrior book. It's 16 or something like that. And get to your story with Billy, he backward created a Mech Warrior in his own head. And we played one until we found out it was actually a game. And then we got Mech Warrior, which was a terrible system, I must say. It's a role-playing system. It was a fun board game, but it was a terrible role-playing system. And then after that, it gets Traveler was the next one after that.
Do you remember Paranoia?
I never played Paranoia. I read it a lot, but I had to play Paranoia, which always bummed me out.
Yeah, I think I played once. Steve just motioned he played once.
Yeah. And it was at
Chad's.
Yes.
Yeah, so we had a friend in high school. His name was Chad, and there was a building with an apartment that was attached, right beside his house that his family owned, and so he had sort of an apartment to himself, and he had pretty much
everything.
I say it felt like every system known to mankind. He had a copy of it, so we had a lot of opportunity to explore a lot of these different systems, and then surprisingly, there was a lot of those systems that I never got to play, really, that I really enjoyed exploring.
Oh, Car Wars? And there was one about spies? Spycraft or something like that?
I forgot about the TSR spy one. That had to have been in there somewhere that was, required advanced degree in calculus and statistics to play because there was so many tables and charts. But yeah, we would have played that before Rolemaster, I think. What is the name of that game? Spy... I can't remember, but TSR had one years and years and years ago. But anyway, so we had exposure to like all those games, and it was a lot of fun to go through these different systems. And the thing that was kind of interesting, I think, is that you quickly learn to break down the system and get the elements of the system as opposed to the genre. So you could have a system and the genre was sort of melded to the system, but they didn't have to be. So you could theoretically use the system that you liked better, the mechanics of it, to a different genre, which is something I think we explored a bit. But there was a lot of neat stuff going on in the early days of role-playing about changing the mechanics. So this question. What's your favorite mechanics that's not Traveler? That last last statement is for Jimmy.
Probably John's homebrew system.
Okay, what's your favorite published one that's not Traveler?
Go to Steve. Come back to me.
Oh, God. mechanic. I really like 5th edition's reliance on advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah, I think it does simplify. It takes a lot of. One of the things that's cool about 5th edition and the advantage disadvantage is I go, you know what? You can get really detailed into the minutia of the math.
That background noise is Frank's stomach.
Yes, you can get. Hungry. It's my familiar.
Your stomach is your familiar. Well, what kind of role did it lose?
Yes.
My new master. I'm a stomach.
Okay, so I really like the fact that they boiled down a lot of complexity to this effectively a fudge factor. I think that's cool because, again, as we've mentioned before in the podcast, we're a theater of the mind kind of group. So this is one thing that sucked about the spy one is they wanted to quantify literally every possible scenario, and it became tedious. The advantage and disadvantage is nice because it goes, ish, which I like. It's cool.
So having thought about it, and coming back to the question, I think it'd probably be the Rolemaster tables. Those were a lot of fun. The first time you rolled on them, it got old quick, but I did like Steve's shaking his head.
You're a terrible person.
I love Rolemaster and Space Master. I'm perfectly honest with you. I love that system more than any other, and I desperately wish we had that for the cell phone age. Because with the advanced technology, you could just do it. And they were cool. And particularly if you could have like a bank that people could add to. So like you roll that and the possible things are, there's 50 of them. It could be any one of 50 or whatever, including what you roll. So I think that if we updated it for technology, it would by far be my favorite, not traveler, not homebrew.
I don't remember if this is an urban legend in gaming or if I actually read it on one of those many, many tables. Was there an option for tripping over an invisible turtle on one of those D100 charts?
Yeah, because you're looking at two guys who memorized every one of those D100 charts.
I expect you all to remember the things that I don't.
Wow. Prepare to be disappointed,
so
my
that's
friend.
A lifetime of disappointment right there. Okay, so let's do the inverse. So we did firsts, and we didn't do first adventures, did we? So let's do the favorites, because we talked a little bit about our first adventure, Keep on the Borderlands, and I'm not sure what yours was, but I'm sure it was. I think you probably entered midstream in that one. I don't remember.
Well, actually, mine was in John's room, and my first. All right, let's change this up just a bit. What was the first monster encounter that you two remember?
Kobold. It was definitely Kobold.
Rust Monster, because Billy's a jerk.
It was my first time playing John's room with you two, and we encountered a water weird.
You know, I was sitting there going, where's he going with this? How can he possibly remember this? And then as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, yeah. He's right. He's totally right.
Yeah. And, so after Dungeons & Dragons came out, the Choose Your Own Adventure books came out and all of those kinds of things. When we were down in North Carolina, I bought one of those books in junior high at the bookstore at the mall. And when we were back at your aunt's house, going through it, it had a water weird in it. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
One of the things I've always really appreciated about D&D is its menagerie of bad guys. I don't know if there's any other system that has that breadth and depth. Even some of them are silly and stupid, but I can't think of any other system that does that. So there's a lot to choose from, in the original AD&D.
Traveler.
Does it have any bad guys in it? In the game? Like anywhere in the rules?
No, that's you get to make up your own. And,
well, I'm just saying it's got a lot of, as a first system though, whatever you can invent isn't necessarily the best thing. Having some constraint, some guidelines, for example, is very helpful, particularly if you're a teenager. As you get more experience, I agree with you. Do what you want. And I don't think I hardly ever use, unless I'm running a module. When I'm running D&D, it's humans, is because that's interesting stories for me. But So it's not varied in terms of different creatures, but the variance in humans is interesting for me. So I think but that takes experience to get there.
Yeah, you're right.
There's a game system you left out that we played in high school.
Which is? I actually left out, another one that I know of.
So when I was visiting...
Are you talking about the superhero one?
Yeah.
Okay, Palladium Books. That was the one I left out. Yeah,
Yeah.
So Palladium Books, I did leave that one out. And that was, I think, probably my most frustrating rule set, without a doubt, because they tried to mimic superheroes. And it was cool because I was really into comic books, and I really liked it. I was very excited about it. And I did the dumbest thing ever. I ran one of my first times running. There was like 9 people in the party, and it was dumb. But the rules themselves, I think, were so uneven. It was if you were a min-maxer, there was only a couple things you could do. You pick a couple different character types, and it was so far superior that it wasn't even funny. So, but that's to another topic. So we said, firsts and adventures. What's your least favorite system that you played, except for MechWarrior, which is barely a system, so I don't know if we should count that. That's a difficult question.
I love BattleTech.
I love the BattleTech, the tactical part.
Right, the gladiatorial.
But the role-playing game for MechWarrior, it just wasn't very realized, and that's the problem. It was because it was built around a board game.
I actually pulled that off the shelf last night to use to prop up my camera. I was doing some filming last night, and I was thinking to myself, I'm glad I didn't burn this because it now has a purpose.
It's not a good system, so I don't want because it's not a well-formed system. I don't want to include that. But what's your least favorite mechanics? That system that had mechanics?
Rollmaster.
Yeah, and it had a lot of fiddly bits. And Space Master, it's just a different genre, but it's the same fiddly bits. So there's a lot of fiddly bits there. So I can see why it would be very frustrating. Leveling up a character took like 4 hours. And you only had one set of books. So, it was a real pain because you'd have to go, okay, we're done. And next week we'll trade books around. And it was a bit of a pain. So I totally understand why that's the least favorite for you.
And those books were hard to find and they were expensive for what, it seemed like they were, at least at the time. My least favorite game I've played, and you see, I don't know if it's the mechanics, but it was GURPS. I played with a couple of people in Tennessee when I was there, and they were GURPS people, and I did not mesh with that system at all.
The thing I thought was interesting about GURPS is the reason I think systems are fascinating because they introduce concepts that you don't get. So, for example, D&D, you don't get the concepts of advantages and disadvantages. I mean, the 5th edition says you have advantage and you have disadvantage, but you don't have these quirks and these advantages and disadvantages. And that was really cool for me to read about in GURPS. I thought that was really neat to think about these little odd things that you can do. But I agree, I didn't, to use a colloquial term, I didn't cotton to it much. It's just, it wasn't my least favorite, but I couldn't really get myself into it for some reason. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say something very controversial. My least favorite system is the First Traveler.
There's something wrong with you, Frank. You're my least favorite person at this table right now.
And the reason is because now if you modify Traveler, it's a great system, but you have to modify it. But the built-in mechanics has 2 major problems with it that were a real turnoff for me as a player, not as a game master, as a player. The first is when you get done with your character, that was it. There was nothing. There's nothing in the original. There's no way to improve your character. There's no way to get better. There's nothing. And it was kind of, particularly at that point in my life, I didn't understand. I never experienced a system where you couldn't improve. And that bothered me. And I had real issues with that. Now, we were lucky because the guy we played with said, yeah, that's dumb. And he came up with a system that I really love and I think is ingenious for improving a character. It took very little modification, but the actual rules themselves I don't like because of that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. The modification that Steve came up with, this is not the Steve sitting at the table here. This is our other friend, Steve. Our other Steve friend. I've been drinking.
Steve is an adjective now.
So yeah. Well, what nobody realizes yet is that we have had too many Steves.
It's a very popular name apparently for people.
We had to make modifiers for us in order to differentiate.
And the Steve we're talking about, oddly enough, his name it vacillates between old Steve, because he's older than us, and Steve.
I always call him Music Steve or Steve-O.
Yeah. But anyway, so the modification that he made...
The modification he made was he would keep track of the skills you used throughout the game. And so he would put little ticks beside the skill, and once they added up to a certain amount, he would give you a rank in that skill. And then later, he adjusted that to where any skill you used, he would keep track of the number of successful uses of that skill, and then he would allow you to pick which skill from the ones that you use that you could rank up.
And you had to roll a die, and if you succeeded or whatever, then you rolled a once. Because that game just uses D6s. And you'd roll a D6 and you'd get that number of points, like a tenth of a point, 0.2, 0.7, or 6, I'm sorry. And then the next time you did it again, and so it could take 5 or 6 uses before you went up a full, and it didn't count. So like if you had a 6 in a skill, and you got a 0.2, another 0.2, another 0.2, you're at 6.6. It doesn't matter. You're still at 6. It always rounds down until you hit the next whole number, which was 7. So it was kind of cool and put a little randomness in it. I really enjoyed that part of it. So, and I really like the character creation in that game. And the fact that you can die during character creation, which is kind of cool.
The first time I ever created a character, again, playing with Steve and John, my first character was turning out fantastic and died in his 3rd term. It was really sad.
And the second thing I really didn't like about the original game was the person who wrote it. When they wrote the parts about making a world or making a spaceship or making anything that wasn't a character, you needed an advanced degree in physics to understand what the heck any of it meant. And I didn't have the expertise to understand any of it. And I kind of felt that the mechanics got a little too non-gamey, more model-y. And if you're trying to make a realistic science fiction game, that's useful, but I wasn't terribly interested in a realistic science fiction game. I was interested in fun. And it hampered the fun a little bit for me. So that's what the original unmodified. Now, the subsequent versions, actually, they said, let's just get rid of that, make it a little more simplified and gamey, is enhanced immensely. So it's now my favorite system, but it's interesting how just little changes can make a huge difference on perception.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so the last one here is future game. What system have you never gotten a chance to play that you always wanted to? I can name like 4. Feel free to name more than one. And why?
We still haven't played the OVA system from Wise Turtle Publishing.
We have not, and it's a very dumb reason. The reason we haven't, and I'll admit it, it's a personality fault of mine. It's based upon anime, and its art obviously is in manga. Its art is depicted that way, and I really don't like that art style. So that system, I have not given a fair shake. I have not as a mechanics thing. I think that also, to some extent, I'm going to put it on Steve. He's really the only person that can run that, I think, wrap their head around it. And he hasn't been real aggressive about pursuing that. I think if you're a little more aggressive, you could force the issue. And I will acknowledge it. I'm a stumbling block. I will happily make a character. But part of it is I don't know how to wrap my head around that fiction. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to play that. Like I know how to play Traveler because it's like The Expanse or whatever. I know how to play D&D, but I don't know how to play that. So I think part of it is it's intimidating for me. That's why we haven't done it. So I can totally see that being I want to play it.
The interesting thing about it is I believe you can divorce the core mechanics from anime.
If you read it, it doesn't have to be that way. It's conceived that way, but it doesn't have to be. Absolutely.
Yeah. But there was also this one piece when we were looking through it that didn't seem to make sense. And I just hadn't followed up with the guy who created the game to ask him about how that mechanic worked because I wasn't sure if we were going to get to play it. But I'll be more aggressive. We'll do that.
How about you?
I think I'd like to try a Fate game. It's just so out of my wheelhouse, and it would be interesting to try a Fate game just for the experience of it. I don't think I would like it, but I'd just like to try it.
So here's a good question: is try it as a gamer or as a DM?
as a gamer. I would not want to do it as a DM.
How about you, Steve, with yours?
Would I want to be a player or a DM?
Yeah. Because you could have two different, I would like to play this, I'd like to run this. Those are actually two different questions if you think about it.
Wow. Both.
Yeah, that's fair. You can think of one you'd like to run? I mean, you kind of run everything you'd like to run, but...
Oh, definitely. There's a bunch of these one-page RPGs, like Everybody is John. Something like that.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool. So I asked these guys because I'm stalling. Because I don't have a good answer. I'm gonna get a little lame here. The game that I most like to play, which is one I've played a lot, so it's not like I haven't played it. I have played it a ton. It's just that because of the dynamics of our group, I don't get to play it. As I'd like to play D&D. Because I get to run D&D, but I never get to play D&D. And I miss playing. But there's absolutely no reason I couldn't go to my local gaming store and join a party or anything like that. So it's not like it's not something that can happen. So it's a cop-out answer. The non-cop-out answer, and I don't think I would be very good at it, is the H.P. Lovecraft stuff. What's that system that's based on H.P. Lovecraft?
Call of Cthulhu. And we actually played one of those. It was not good. It was hard to play.
Yeah, that's why I don't think I would be a good player. I don't think the way we play lends itself to the way that should be played. And I don't know that any of us are a good enough GM to play that way. So I'd like to play with somebody who's really good at it, but I don't think I'd be good at it. I would like to do it to know, yeah, this is not my thing. I wish I was good at it, but I've always been intrigued by it.
Side question.
Yeah.
Related.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed I did not say the run one yet, so.
What was your favorite character you played?
Oh, for me, that's easy. The first Traveler character with Steve Hill. He was a scout, and he died in a very average way. He just got hit by a stray bullet. It was the first time I'd ever had a character die in a game, and it was as awesome as it was traumatic. And it was cool because then my next character, everything seemed a little bit more real. So it gave more weight to the game itself. It was a really good time.
Do you have an answer? This is a really hard question for me. I'll be honest with you.
I do. It's a dual thing. I have a character in my heart, and that was the mage I played for years.
So when you were a kid, your first, so to speak.
Yeah, in my heart. But my favorite as like a real character's name was Bob. He was a Cro-Magnon Neanderthal hybrid, and he had super intelligence and precognitive empathy. He also couldn't swim because his bones were too dense.
I mean, if I had to pick one in my heart, it would be the first character I had. But it wasn't terribly answer. It was just generic fighter, ranger, kick everybody's butt guy. And, it's because I played him forever and he's, the first, so to speak. So I have affinity, I guess, with the word for him. But other than that, I don't actually know I can name a favorite character. I don't. There's a character type I like playing, but I don't think I can name a character I was like, wow, I really nailed it. And I think part of the problem is I don't play right. And I know that. I play what I feel like, I play it safe. I tend to play very similar-esque characters. And I really need to come up with a character concept and play the concept. And I think that'd be that would be probably what I would like to do in the future. So that would be the system that I would like to do. No matter what the system is, I like to play outside of my wheelhouse, which I'm not really good at, not really comfortable at. So, still haven't answered the run question, have I?
No, you haven't.
And the reason is because the things that I would like to run, I know I'm not good at running, at least with the people I play. I would like to run a science fiction campaign, and I'm not good at it. So, it would probably be a Modified Traveler, or even it would be the Star Wars game. I'm just not good at it, and I don't feel comfortable. So that's what I'd like to be able to do that well, or not terrible.
No, I disagree with that completely, because even though you had such a hard time with the murder bots,
I will never think about Wookiees the same way.
Well, This the thing is, that's a really interesting, and it's a whole separate podcast topic, right? But it's really interesting. From my perspective, that was a nightmare. That whole campaign was shoddily run. I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody was having fun. I didn't enjoy any.
Whoa.
No. Again, my perspective. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying my perspective. I couldn't keep on top of anything. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I wasn't depicting anything well. I wasn't responding in reasonable ways. Everybody was like bored and didn't know what was going on and was not having fun. The other guy we were playing with, John, similar. And I thought it was probably, if I had to rank, if we had a podcast topic where we would say, what's your worst running experience? That was it. I did that the worst from my perspective. But I mean, obviously from the two people here, they had the polar opposite opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair to you, Frank, I mean, it's not often that you have to respond to a 3PO droid hanging Wookiee pelts like drapes inside your bridge. Your ship.
The motivations were just not something that I could wrap my head around. But again, perceptions can be very different, you know. So, and then I think that's why it's interesting to have these conversations about favorite and least favorite and things like that, because it's kind of interesting the things that you may not realize, the things that are matter or don't matter. Jimmy reacting to my depiction of Traveler and initially going, "You're insane," and then going, "Well, I see your point." So little things can make a big difference.
That as an aside, my favorite game mechanic ever is obviously from Traveler because I love the system. But it's when you get injured, it takes off from your attributes. So that everything you do, the more injured you become, everything you do is more difficult, particularly when you're trying to fight hand-to-hand or using your dexterity to modify your gun combat. I just love the way that works.
What's your favorite mechanic?
So you remind me of something. So I like what I said earlier, I like the advantage, disadvantage in 5th edition, but there was a guy in Tennessee who was making his own role-playing game, and he had a magic system, and I worked on a magic system for it. I don't know how much I ever told you guys about this, but it was completely point-based and scalable for anything that you wanted to do at any level with any spell. And I worked on it for weeks. And I was really proud of it, and I gave him my only copy, and he took it. And that, I think, is my favorite mechanic, because it reminded me of what you were saying about Traveler, how as you're injured, you become weaker. Well, with this system that I did in, 12th grade, the summer between 12th grade and college, it was a similar thing for magic. As to strength.
I did that in college, a very similar thing for magic. I've still got it. It's called Rollenspiel. And yeah, we were taking German at the time. What can I say? But I should bring that over and let you look at that. I found it the other day while I was going through and organizing my gaming materials.
Great minds.
Yep.
Mine is anything that has sort of a fate, sort of a mechanic where you can do the impossible at the last minute. The Firefly game has that, and so does the latest Star Wars. But essentially, you've got a little bit of control as a player. There's two things are related. As a player, that you can say, "I'm going to pull this out of my butt at the last minute," and I love it because it again sort of factors into the way I think about this as gaming, as a theater of the mind, exciting adventures and things like that. And have that sort of, how did he do that? Well, he used his get out of jail free card at the last minute and pulled it off. One of my favorite moments recently happened was I rolled percentile dice, and Steve's character he was dead. He was going to die. That was a done deal. And I rolled 100 out of 100 and he wasn't. And those little moments are what I live for in gaming. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe you did. Oh my God, that's amazing. That's the cool things. And factoring that into a game, I think is really, really neat when you do that. And the other mechanic, which we don't use enough, and could factor into any game, is when the player gets to basically do a plot point. and say, this is a plot point all of a sudden. I know that guy, or we're buddies, or anything, whenever they are allowed to put that in there. And it's a little bit like improv in acting, where you can just go, and this, and then the DM doesn't have the option of going, no, that's stupid, I'm not doing that. The DM has to go and runs with it. And that's really, really cool, because you never know what's going to happen. At one point they come, yeah, and that makes sense. Or, and you owe money. And then it completes it in a different direction. I think that's fun because it gets the players more involved. So I love those two mechanics the most.
Oh, you know what mechanic I don't remember ever using that I want to try, and I want to know whether you guys have ever used it, is you've seen those dice that have body parts on them, so you can roll them and see. I wouldn't want to do it for every roll, but every once in a while, it would be fun to throw that in. I'd like to try that. Have you guys ever done that?
No, not exactly. But what I've often wondered is why they don't have more of the ability, particularly with a missile weapon, to say, I'm going to take a wild swing or wild shot and have more of a chance to hit, but less control over where you hit. Usually they do the inverse, is that I want to focus on where I want to hit while you have less ability to hit. I think it would be kind of cool to just sort of, I'm just going to shoot, and who knows how you hit him in the big toe. So you don't have. I think that would be a neat mechanic that I don't see a lot of.
And I don't remember which system this was in, because it would have been early 90s. But it was a table-based system for where you strike someone and the damage. So it went off.
Oh, yeah, that was in
Rollmaster, wasn't it?
Was
yeah,
that
Rollmaster, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I did play that. I played a Rollmaster game, but leveling characters was so hard, I sucked at it. But that
I'm telling you, an app, they could app would fix this problem.
Yeah, that is true. Back to Rollmaster. Daggone it.
Okay, so any other first favorites or futures that we didn't talk about?
Oh, one other feature. Did we mention this? I already forgot. That dungeon crawl game that you got.
Yeah. So the cool thing about that, this is a neat mechanic. I think it's the mechanic that interests you, right? Is that you start off with, 6 or 3, several level 0 characters, and they die really, really easy. And basically, you go through an adventure, and whoever's left alive, that's your character. And so it's kind of neat because it's a bit of randomness. I'm going to make 6 characters, and they can't be identical, or whatever it is, and then you end up with something at the end, and that's kind of neat.
Yeah, you're running them through like a Tomb of Annihilation style dungeons, and you're mopping the floor with them, and then whichever one comes out at the other end, if any, that's the character you end up playing with, at least until he gets skanked, and then you go back to the beginning and draw up another set of expendables.
All right. Any last thoughts? Okay.
I gotta get home.
Okay. Well, this has been How We Roll.